When Josh's dad opened the door, he was utterly shocked to find out who stood behind it. After all, the man who had presented himself as a Sapphire Association delegate was the scariest in size. Considering this, Hulk Donovan couldn't contain himself and be mannered. In turn, hosting the surprise guest, said, squeezing the intruder's head out of Josh's parents' view, Bob said he came to report that their son executed the rescue mission successfully, although he would be returning home. Where, pressured to hear the conversation of two men, Peter's messenger felt his head was going to burst into pieces. At the same time, Josh's parents made an offer on how to take over. Bob to come for tea, which he declined politely, stating that he was busy. The moment the front door was shut, drew the attention of the rest of the gang members who did not have the courage to move forward, but were still in pursuit of their leader. Bob proposed they shift to a place that was more convenient for all to resume the conversation. All who had proceeded there with an intention of inflicting harm on Josh's family were already gone, since Bob, responding to Peter's call, had overheard the instruction of cutting off his fingers. After notifying his interlocutor of the existence of a Sapphire Association on the line, Bob tossed the telephone, calling Peter not the most polite statement as off he went. The man pulled out his cell phone and told his boss the issue had been resolved. Around the same time, Peter, on the floor and hearing someone from Sapphire converse with him, totally lost the meaning of what was going on. He could do nothing but curse loudly, using all manner of insults to his emissaries. But then, the side effect of the potion to enhance started picking up steam, which cut the young man's swearing. Josh got up and stood there in stunned silence as the body of his new foe lay in some kind of dried-out mummy sensation, his body desiccating and his skin shrinking up. Peter did nothing but utter some kind of unintelligible words. Climbing up to the face of this tormentor, the young man said calmly that if his foe was to live, then from now on, he would have to save all his strength for the sake of breathing. After which, he took the withered hand of this scoundrel and told him never to set foot near him or his family again in his life. Knowing what awaited him now, Peter observed the wackiest horror read in his eyes. Emily kept a close eye as well on what her savior was up to. And so, Josh, instructing the man on the ground to remember his words for eternity, did the same thing with his hand that he did to the hand of the agent. Martin was already in the hospital, where he was given all the medical care that he needed, where one of the clones stood guard over his piece. A familiar voice coming from the ward window caught the eye of the man. It was Josh, who, when questioned by the agent on why he was coming in the window, responded that visiting hours were long past. When asked concerning his health, Martin elucidated that healers here were present, and therefore he did not take long to remain in the cast. Then the fellow drew the hunter himself's wound, to which he replied that these were mere traces of blood, because the regeneration skill had already healed everything. After which, the fellow continued that these people would never again dare break their peace. Then Josh changed gear and asked if he should get his level recalculated, which amazed the agent, who remembered that the young man had never evinced any curiosity about such a question previously. Then the man explained how, after today's incident, he questioned a lot of things, wherein due to his low rank, so many look down upon him and believe they can easily harm him. After all, if he had a higher level, then so many would just be too afraid to attack him, including Moonstone. To all this, the agent responded that raising the level would definitely benefit the agency and make it stand firm. But he added that this was on set to discourage those who would wish to cause harm, but at least the choice to boost the level or just hold status quo is the hunter's. Soon, Josh sat opposite the man, struggling with issues of reconsidering the level of hunters. Nimble on the keyboard, typing, this man soon made it clear that the guest had an E rank and possessed cloning powers. Therefore, he asked the guy if he would take the test alone, or if a party would be accompanying him. He instantly recalled the agent's breakdown that most do tests in groups because, in a duel, the monster is most often stronger than the hunter. But Martin said straight away, smiling on his face, that in Josh's situation, there was nothing to worry about at all. And when the guy stated that he would do it alone, his interlocutor explained that he would have to fight with a monster of higher rank than him and show proof of victory. But at once the young man turned to him and asked if he could skip the tests for levels C and D and go to B. In his whole career, the man had never heard such an eccentric request from a hunter, and thus he informed the young man that an application can be presented to be promoted only one rank at a time. This was depressing news to the fellow, who realized that there was no means of speeding up the leveling process. The guy who was giving the young man paperwork to complete an application for a higher level considered to himself that with this awful skill, this guy would surely fail. He then included that the monster which the young man had to slay was an erect fish, which had very excellent defense. Not with the most expression, he wished good luck to the individual who was being offered an opportunity for promotion, where the peace of mind of the fellow angered him the most. To escape the sight of the angry fellow was to expect his failure in the examination. But the young fellow never thought of leaving this room. Sitting on one of the tables standing around, he had been seated on this table for over 2 hours, which totally angered the fellow, who never knew why this fellow could not leave to go hunting. But the most surprising aspect was how, at one point, Josh rose from his seat and went back to his interlocutor's table. Presuming the man had gone back on his word and wished to retract his application, the man started telling him what to do when the young fellow unexpectedly cut him off with the words that he had passed the examination. Nothing would take this examiner more by surprise than such an audacious declaration from someone who had not even yet set foot outside the building. Well, Josh just blandly repeated he killed the obligatory monster, which he has proof of, and thus needs his registration as a level D hunter. Where, of course, while the young fellow was resting, lounging, sitting at the table, his clones did all the dirty work at a fast pace. Not knowing what to do in this case, the man signaled that he had no idea how the dude even invited him to this room. But Josh was set to scan the results, claiming that the confirmation already had to be on his computer. The man really received an email coming from the hunting area, stating that one Josh Burnett succeeded in the test. Seeing how his interlocutor's mood totally changed, the young fellow asked him if something was the matter, but he couldn't understand what was taking place. He ordered the guy to hold and was about to dial directly into the observation position of the hunting grounds. The guy who picked up the phone asked the soldier if Josh Burnett really performed well today in the examination and killed a virtuous fish. And after that, he got a stunned reply that this guy actually was present in the hunting grounds today, where he was even caught by video cameras and killed a level D monster. Then the only thing this guy could think of was that this young fellow simply offered some bribe to someone. Well, having seen the dude's moves, which he thought were those of a strange guy, Josh once again asked himself whether this confirmation had reached up to where his conversation partner had no option other than answering in the affirmative and elevating the dude's level, and thereby taking it that this impersonator could really do the unthinkable. The examiner grudgingly congratulated him on his level boost. While the dude was thanking him, the guy thought that he would indeed report the news and arrange everything later. But this was not yet the end, where, with the display of utter shock on his face, the examiner heard the man's request that he needed to up the level so that he would be able to see him achieve his hiding place. Emily glanced around for a while, with her eyes fixed on the crystals she had stored away. She remembered having a recent talk with Josh, where she made her genuine apologies to the man. The girl explained that she had pilfered the crystals from the moonstone, thus having attacked the agency and nearly killing the family of her rescuer. Right away, the man realized why Peter was mentioning getting back some crystals, and hence the young man stood up and gazed at the girl he had just saved. At the moment, it reminded him of how brutally her opponent dislocated the arm of someone attempting to hurt him and his loved ones. She was really amazed when Josh abruptly announced that he could discover no fault of Emily's in what occurred. After all, he would have dealt with these issues anyway, since he had previously given a few members of Moonstone a good beating. The young man also announced that most probably there must be some motive behind the girl's choice to pilfer these crystals, where he does not even know what the Moonstone Association did to her. But he is certain that everything and everyone have their personal motives. And therefore, a bag of concentrated crystals thrown across her shoulders, the girl made up her mind and went to fix things. Everyone who was in the middle of the recalculation of the level had eyes on what is going on a couple of meters from them, where some fellow who never left this room was upgraded one by one from E to B levels. Thinking that he should stop there, the young man thanked the man and departed, where the flabbergasted examiner was hit by the words of the departing man that was definitely enough for today. Suddenly, this man's co-worker, sitting at the adjacent table, noted that the man had finally chosen a promotion, and when he inquired of him if he knew him, his spectacled co-worker replied that this young man had asked for imitation bracelets to go to the hunting grounds, where the bracelet factory was particularly busy discussing this man. Its low level described the absence of hype among hunters, but now it definitely can't be escaped. The last thing his more level-headed colleague had instructed the fellow was that he should have requested the guy for an autograph, because he would sure enough be a celebrity. 1 week later, all the media reported on the fact that some hunter rose 3 levels at once, as well as on the successful return of the Sapphire Association group. The news hero himself was astonished not at what was written and said about him, but at the quantity the Sapphire Association transferred to him. He attempted to explain to Blake that this was too much, but he told him that this should be the reward for completing the job. Josh could not help but remember a particular contract which Martin described to him, but he didn't think that the price for its implementation was so huge. Having ended the conversation, the head of the Sapphire Rovs invited the young man to drop by, stating that the whole gang he saved would be happy to welcome him. When the interlocutor hung up the line, the young man could no longer hold back his feelings. Nevertheless, from there, he did not need to worry about hospital expenses. The sum he got was sufficient for uninterrupted and permanent flow of mana into his sister's body. Simultaneously, the same quantity was sufficient without some other channel of cure for his sister's disease. Where would one employ a healer with level S to cure her? The fellow was hell-bent on getting such a fellow, and even by asking him to come to convince him to cure the head of Moonstone. Elmer Maddox was furious, cursing Peter and informing him that he was completely useless, even though it was sent by the wolves. The project got very dangerous as the Sapphire Association came at the issue, and thus Elmer planned to burn useless documents. But the man was surprised to get distracted suddenly by a woman's voice. And now, the association head Fox, who appeared beside him, already said, based on rumors, it was the Moonstone who burgled her warehouse with power crystals. The girl was stubborn, and the man advised not to get all worked up and to admit all in a friendly tone initially because there had been a miscommunication. But in a flash, Elmer employed his first ability, attempted to handle the uninvited guest, but Merle's response was far faster and far more lethal than he could ever have thought. Having caused an unsightly wound on her opponent, the girl instructed him to be quiet, as she was not going to speak to him. Upon discharge from the hospital, Martin's first was to go to the Sapphire Association office. Responding to Blake's inquiry, the agent replied that his arm would be out of commission for a bit, and then said his thanks to the man for saving his hunter's family. Having said there was nothing he needed to thank him for, the head of the association made it very evident that the attackers were members of the Moonstone. To this, Martin made it very evident that only Moonstone wasn't included, as a young man named Peter Stone was part of the attack. At hearing this name, Blake immediately knew that this was the same fellow that Josh turned into a living mummy. But the head of the Sapphires was flabbergasted that his interlocutor right away informed him that he knew this same Peter from his activities within the Wolves Association. During men were trying to come up with the ways they could depict the collaboration between the Moonstone and Wolves Associations, Meryl came into the office with some papers in her hand and suddenly informed that the Moonstone people were making a concentrate of power crystals for the Wolves. Blake right away interrupted that his old acquaintance had already met Elmer, and to Martin's inquiry, the girl explained that the leader of Moonstone was alive and that the agent would have an opportunity to witness him. As Blake sorted through the documents, Merrill told him that the crystal concentrate was being somehow converted into an enhancement drug, and as is the pack of wolves somehow a part of all this. Getting involved in crystals and all that there surrounding them is extremely dangerous. The legalizing of hunters, their licensing, and opening areas for hunting were achieved only after the first great breakthrough of monsters. But not all would agree with this priority, where hunters, seeing only freedom and independence, started working underground and illegally, establishing a close circle. They conduct illegal deals, utilize unlicensed guns, and hunt illegally without authorization or permission. The bartender, who was as normal behind the counter and drying his glass, was disrupted by a woman's voice. It was Emily who introduced and brought in the man those very focused crystals which she had plundered from the hunting ground. The man was greatly shocked that the girl had managed to obtain them, and she was already thinking about how much money everything could be sold for. But the expression of her interlocutor did not express joy at all, where all he could do was apologize after not being able to immediately comprehend what was going on. Emily inquired of her friend for whom he was apologizing. Well, two men in white masks were already walking towards the girl, telling her to come along. Emily tried to obtain help from the bartender, but he could only apologize once again, asserting that he had no choice. A certain man drew attention to what was going on and realized that it was becoming terribly loud here. Then he turned his attention to the masked individuals, stating that today, everyone is crazy. And then one of them, whom he cursed badly, approached the man and instructed him to step away from his path. This man attempted to utter a few words more, but simultaneously he got an incredibly powerful blow. Observing the vanquished adversary, the masked individual only realized that such alcoholics irritated him, and just as he attempted to turn back to proceed to kidnap Emily, he got such a shock that he could not manage to keep his feet. And Josh, openly standing in front of the girl, saw that everything was going just as he ordered. And in that precise moment, he recollected that evening discussion that had occurred between them after they won against Peter. When he explained to the girl, trembling with fear, that he was not very angry with her because she stole the crystals and thus de facto put him in danger, he added something more, that Emily is now a part of the VN agency group, and thus she has to do for the reason that he states, namely attempt to sell the same crystals which she stole. And standing in front of the conquered foe, the young man realized that the fish swallowed the bait. Standing before the locked door, nor would obey orders which he already heard many times. And upon completion, the man standing in front of him asked him to comprehend his hands for examination, to which the head of Volov replied that to examine a level A hunter for arms is nonsense, and upon his interlocutor's question whether the guest had a weapon, Norwood replied that he would just materialize out of thin air and fall a burning block on his head. Observing the various look on the gatekeeper's face, the man laughed, saying that it was all a joke, after which the doors behind the gatekeeper opened, and he told that the seer was expecting a guest shortly. Norwood already stood in rather a spacious room, where before him, on some kind of throne, sat a dark figure. Welcoming her guest, the seer addressed him once more in her woman's voice. But the man, smiling menacingly, realized that the seer's words sounded as if she did not believe that he would be out of the house, to which the hooded lady replied by stating that yes, naturally she knew of his arrival, but her proposal would still be the same, where she proposed him to surrender. But the wolves' leader reminded her of what she used to claim, that all the people of this world would bow their heads in front of him. But today, suddenly, she invites him to surrender. To this, the fortune teller elucidated that somebody had altered the man's fate recently, and it was changed. Norwood evidently did not appreciate such news, where he asked her to inform him of the name of the individual who altered his destiny. But the woman abruptly answered that even she today does not have an answer to this question, where we are referring to a complete team of individuals. Passing the phone to the man on the ground, the mask on his face crumbling into pieces, Josh asked that he enter the screen unlock code, but his vanquished opponent then uttered that the guy could kill him instantly anyway. The young man decided otherwise, stating that he was not going to give him such a comfortable death, but would instead let it be in the hands of those men whom he and his friend had managed to upset. After all, those people were so angered at their offenders, and even said that they would not be able to track them. Thereby, the problem emerged on whether they would send him to the other world soon and without enduring. The sound of a mobile phone drew the eye of one of the Wolves Association personnel. After picking the call, Matt picked up a message that they had cheated the crystal concentrate, and then he commanded the delivery of the material to the third plant, where he instructed caution after what had happened to the members of the Moonstone. And when Matt asked him why his assistant's voice, Josh made hissing and crackling noises, informed him that he was just downstairs, turned again to the man on the floor, informing him that now he would have to go all the way to plant number 3, and when he started getting angry that his own men would kill him for this, Josh was just about to welcome those hungry for revenge at the time. Since he knew he had no choice, the bandit tried to wake the man into awareness that this is not what he swore to him for help, but he had nothing to argue Josh to disprove his accusations that he swore not to kill him alone. And thus, the young fellow, with a smile, overheard the man's accusations that he will do all that it takes. Already in the road, the man told Emily to tell Martin all the details that they were able to obtain. After having clarified that she did all that, the girl, with shame, cast her eyes downwards, gratefully thanked her rescuer. The young man responded that there was nothing to thank him for, since they were walking side by side. Emily asked whether the people who were walking alongside him were his clones, something that dazed Josh, who thought at least all the people around him understood this. But on saying this, the girl suddenly fired at him if he even knew her name. And when the young man looked at the girl in puzzlement, explaining to the girl that he was talking to her just as a chemist, he immediately attracted her blazing outburst. When he promised to do better, Emily asked why the fellow was missing along with his clones today, where, on being questioned about this point, the young fellow simply smiled enigmatically. After all, now his loyal clones were going to taste real meat for the very first time in their lives as an award for work. And the waiter returned and informed them that all was prepared, and cafe patrons could start taking a bite of the most tender vey. One of the clones inserted it in his mouth. He could feel immediately the scented sauce running down his tongue and the delicate strands of the meat yielding to just one touch. Hearing the taped call of the phone conversation, Martin was unable not to recognize the voice of the individual Josh was conversing with. After all, this was the same individual to whom he owed a debt for the fact that he had been disqualified from the Wolves Association. Now, Blake has established that the link between the Moonstone and the Wolves is apparent and in place. Merrill, who was in the locality, usually sorted things out, labeling that according to word received, there were only 5 associations that operated in concert. The Wolves now, the Moonstone no longer exists, and 4 remain, all of level B. Here, Martin stated that with proof such as this, they can attempt to handle the wolves since their actions in producing the drugs are unlawful. But the others, the very moment, pointed out that it wasn't likely to be performed because the wolves themselves do not enter into production via the hands of other people, and they also have good backing in the association. And even if you attempt to intervene, the leader of the association will surely assist Norwood sort out these problems. Merrill heard attentively the lines of Blake that in fact they did not have to hurry in this issue. The man also approached the agent and informed him that he would be provided with security immediately. And when the agent was ready to counsel Josh to be cautious, Blake emerged at once and stated that the guy could get along without it. Upon reading Martin's note about what they learned, the young man instructed him not to shine anywhere. Emily, who stood nearby, asked Josh on the current affairs with the Moonstone unification. After having that the issue with them had been fixed, the young man shifted the topic, explaining that the girl still hadn't had time to visit the agency's new office. Informing her that she would be amazed, the young man asked her to visit it with him now. Martin, who had already arrived, welcoming the youngsters, told them that he himself had just arrived. Walking through the offices, all saw how much larger they were compared to the former office, ruined by the bandits. Emily sat patiently, waiting for Josh, and Martin spoke of how they would be the best agency in the nation one day. The young man drew his attention to the girl, making her aware that there was a special place for her here as well, and thus, opening the door to one of the rooms, the fellow walked her over to a magnificent chemistry lab, where he showed them that they had the most advanced equipment installed there, which would assist in the brewing of potions. The girl wandered around her mini-world, bringing all that lived there to attention. Martin told her that if she needed anything else, she could always reach him. The man still went on to tell her that in the next room, all was prepared for a night stay, even having a bed. Very ashamed that these young adults obviously knew that she had no place to go, Emily thanked them for their graciousness. At one point, the attention of the agency head was diverted by a ringing cell phone. When the man heard what he was being informed, his face instantly changed. Breaking the bond, Martin, struggling over his words in a hurry, quickly caught Josh's attention as best he could, where he surprised declared that the young man was rushed to the hospital immediately. Standing in the same room where Josh's struggle with the Moonstone folks and Peter had just occurred, Norwood looked at the blood-soaked floor, and at some moment, without ever looking away from the blood stain, the man gave an order for someone to emerge. At the same moment, a certain individual started to materialize from the black patch which had appeared on the floor. A second later, this black mass materialized into a very cliched masked man. Upon being asked by Norwood, his spy gave the explanation that the head of the Moonstone was being detained by the Fox, and all his papers had been taken away. The man also mentioned that seemingly their rivals even knew the address of one of the factories. Frowning, the head of the Volkov Association took out 2 vials from the inside pocket of his jacket. Giving them to his assistant, he mentioned that he knew whom to apply it to. And while the man returns where he came from, Norwood noted down that if they need these sea so much, then he will provide them for them, though they haven't yet mastered. The Moonstone Association head, Elmer Maddox, was tied up in one of the Fox Association offices to a chair, and then, abruptly before his eyes, a black spot fell on the floor, which quickly started forming to the shape of a man. And so, Elmer asked in fear of why Norwood's own assistant came near him, to which he started sucking liquid from one of the bubbles collected from the boss. Said that he had come in the boss's place and to spare Elmer, getting nearer to the man who already started freaking out with a syringe in his hand, went the masked man to him, telling him he did not have anything to fear. Attempting to somehow avoid the shot, Elmer asked to be halted, but his visitor assured that it sure would not hurt. Merrill, to her office with Blake walking along beside her, told that she did not need an escort, to which the man replied he just wanted to speak to the top Moonstone official. At some point, the girl suddenly told that she definitely smells burning. Peeking around the corner, saw the Fox Association office on fire, where there was a single monster in the fire. And now, Meryl has already arrived at her office, where all effort on the part of the man was useless. An employee who got her sweat informed her that at some point there appeared to be a monster in the basement, which even level B hunters could not do anything to prevent. This educated the girl that the monster that was attacking her was not lower than level A, but no answer was gotten to the question of where this monster came from, considering that there is not even a single portal nearby. But when the girl witnessed the monster and the flames that surrounded it, she couldn't help but remember the head of the Moonstone and how much it could do. There was no question, but that before her stood the mutated Elmer Maddox. The survivor of the fight with Josh, Peter Stone, found himself in the hospital, plugged into a life support system. Very soon, the same masked man stood at his bedside, informing him that this time the young man had lost the fight. He had already withdrawn the syringe from the body of Peter, mumbling that this would at least restore his mobility. When suddenly, a woman's voice stopped him. Emma, who was standing at the entrance, told him that she did not know what the uninvited guest intended, but he would certainly not succeed during her shift. Noticing that the girl was not his opponent, the masked man moved immediately to her back and advised her that if in this situation, he would attempt to do so on her. But Josh halted the action of his hand by telling him that in medical institutions, physicians are the only people qualified to give injections, after which the young man dealt his next victim with a vicious blow.